Now we're going to look at topic 6.2, which is global energy consumption. So global energy consumption just refers to sort of the total amount of energy used by all human activities worldwide. And it's basically all the energy sources like fossil fuels, renewable ones, etc. So let's take a look at maybe we can see some trends in the global energy consumption. So first of all, we're going to take a look at the graph right over here. So the graph starts from 1800 to 2023. Look at what happens, okay? So as time goes on, we go through, the industrial revolutions and whatever, right? And notice how the world has been using more and more energy as time goes on. And, thank you to Our World in Data for providing this graph. Anyways, so as time moves on, the total global energy consumption increases, okay? And specifically, we're starting to use more fossil fuels. So the key trend here is that fossil fuels rule the world. Look at this. Natural gas makes up a big percentage. Natural gas is a fossil fuel, oil is a fossil fuel, coal is a fossil fuel. All of them, notice how they make up the biggest percentage of energy use, right, on the graph, right? They're the thickest on the graph. So they make up the most energy usage. Now let's take a look at why is that. So as our countries industrialize, we go from using subsistence fuels, which is just kind of fuels to kind of meet our basic needs. So, fuels for like cooking or heating, right? Basic needs. So, an example of subsistence fuel is biomass, and some types of biomass are wood, charcoal, poop. You can burn all this stuff to cook food. You can burn all this stuff to heat food, right? Think about freaking caveman back then, right? They have to use this type of resource in order to survive. However, as time moves on and countries start industrializing, we start using more fossil fuels. And the reason why that is because as countries develop, people are going to be richer. And as people become richer, there's going to be more demands for energy. So think about, for example, cars, right? As countries develop, so on and so on, people are going to start demanding, better transportation, for example. That's when, the car was created. People are going to demand, better home, better housing, So, you got all this electricity, fancy stuff. So, yeah, basically, as countries become richer, people become richer, you feel what I'm saying? Higher demand in energy in total, right? So, you have stuff like oil, which is used for transportation. We have coal, this is used for electricity. And we have natural gas. So, if you ever turn on a stove, key idea to know is that right over here, developed countries, they use a lot of energy, right? But it turns out that developing countries actually use more energy in total. And the reason why is because think about the population size. So if you think back to Unit 3 of APES, right? Because when countries are industrializing, child labor is prominent. It's good to have a lot of children in the workforce. There's going to be a very high population, meaning that developing countries will actually have to use more energy in total due to their population size. However, developed countries, so that means they're already developed countries use more energy per person, okay, due to their developed economy. So that's an important idea to know. Developing countries use more energy in total. Developed countries use more energy per person. Finally, we're going to talk about factors affecting energy usage. So kind of what kind of factors determines, if you're using, fossil fuels in one area, right? What factors determine if, you might be using renewable energy sources like solar energy in an area? What factors determine this? First of all, might be the most obvious is the resource available. If I don't got fossil fuels in my area, I'm not going to be able to use it, right? So some regions have abundant fossil fuels. Others, they might have a lot of sunlight, which is maybe why they would use solar energy. Maybe it's very windy there, which is why they use wind energy. So depending on what type of energy is available there, that's going to determine what type of energy you use. Economic factors, maybe it can cost a lot to extract, produce, just all around, kind of maintain this energy resource. And in addition, maybe there's a high demand for the resource. So maybe for the consumer, it can be a little too expensive because high demand means, higher price, you feel what I'm saying? Finally, actually, no, not finally, government policies. So, there can be sort of incentives, there can be regulations that influence energy production and consumption. For example, there's actually something called a tax credit. So governments sometimes will actually encourage the building of renewable energy kind of areas, right? So maybe they would encourage building like solar panels, for example, and they do this by providing tax credits. Tax credits are basically financial incentives that kind of reduce the amount of tax somebody has to pay to the government. So it reduces the amount of tax someone has to pay to the government, and that can encourage some companies to maybe switch to more renewable energy resources. Also, you got to think about the environmental impact, right? So, there can be possible concerns about emissions, habitat destruction, and pollution, and that kind of guides, maybe the type of energy that's there. For example, if you burn coal, that's going to release a lot of things called particulate matter. It's going to release a lot of nitrogen oxides. It's going to release a lot of carbon dioxide. It's going to be, if you're living there, if you're living right next to like a coal powered fire plant, if you're living right next to a coal powered fire plant, wait, what? If you're living next to a coal power plant, well, I don't want to live there, right? I'm going to breathe in all of these pollutants and my lungs are going to get messed up, right? So there's obviously going to be concerns about emission. I do not want to live next to a coal fire power plant. I do not want to live next to a nuclear power plant, man. I don't want that thing exploding. So there can be concerns about emissions or, just safety in general, right? And finally, you got technological advancements. So maybe let's say, if some area randomly came up with a really good way of getting fossil fuels, well, then they're probably going to use fossil fuels more because, this technology makes it really easy for them to get fossil fuels. So sort of improvements in, energy efficiency, how they store that energy. And finally, generation impact feasibility. That just means kind of the method used to generate energy. And this kind of affects how practical that energy source is for widespread use.